Hello my friends, this is Ian and welcome to today's video, which is a number of firsts, really. It's the 1st of October, it's the first drawing for Inktober, it's my first ever Inktober, and it's also my first time using ink to ink, which sounds weird, but I've never really used ink, just straight up ink with an ink pen to ink. I normally use ink from a fine liner or something, but I'm going to talk a bit more about the materials and the pens and stuff that I'm using later in the video. I figured it would be better to start by talking about the character and the prompt and the things that I'm doing during the sketch phase whilst you're watching the sketch phase. The first prompt for Inktober 2018 is Poisoned, and I had a number of ideas of things that I could potentially do with the prompt. I flitted back and forth about ideas of using the poisoned apple from Snow White and various other poisoned foodstuffs, really. But instead I came up with this idea for a back alley salesman type of character. I've always really liked those characters when they crop up in things, like the one which comes to mind is the Voodoo Man from the Disney's Princess and the Frog, which I feel is also an underrated Disney, but hey, that's just me. But that kind of a character where not only are they offering you poison in some way, something that is going to poison you or somebody you know, or just your life in general will be poisoned by being in contact with this person, but they themselves are then a poisonous character. They're not just, they're poisonous figuratively, and they are offering you a literal poison. So I liked playing with that kind of aspect of the whole thing. I also wanted to play with the framing of the character and have his cloak be the frame of him as well. I also give it this feeling like he's swept up in some kind of a demonic or psychotic whirlwind of stuff. And that's absolutely how I would sell that scene to a producer. A demonic or psychotic whirlwind of stuff. Anyway, moving on to the materials and things that I'm using. To do the sketch, the rough sketch work, I used a 2B mechanical pencil that gives me quite thick lines, but it lets me very loosely, very freely create shapes and geometry. I then used a kneaded rubber to remove a lot of that and just leave kind of a shadow of it behind, and then moved on with a HB mechanical pencil. That I used to kind of get in more of the detail in the main focus area, the face, the hand, the bottle of poison, just so I knew when I came into doing the ink work where I was, where the detail needed to be added. That moves us nicely on, and in time, hopefully, to the actual inking process, which I guess is what Inktober is all about. And this is where things kind of get a little bit interesting. I'm going to tell you a story. So when I was about 16 or 17, I worked for a brief period of time in a zoo. Well, I say a zoo, it was actually more of a wildlife park. It was the kind of place where they take rescued exotic animals which would either been in the pet trade or were at zoos which had closed down or were too sick to stay on display in the zoo. But they had all sorts of different animals there. Despite the fact it was just a rescue wildlife park, they did have quite a few fairly exotic animals. I mean, they had capybara, which are amazing. They had one called Bertie, and I loved the thing. It was like a giant guinea pig, sort of a average dog-sized guinea pig, and it behaved like a dog. It would come up and sit next to you and rub up against your legs so that you could scratch it behind the ear. It was a guinea pig that acted like a dog. It was awesome. What more could you want? This place is also where I gained my love of ring-tailed lemurs. If that's something you don't know, then you do now. I love ring-tailed lemurs, and it's because I used to work with the ring-tailed lemurs in this park, and they were fantastic. But they had all sorts of things: chipmunks, emus, zebra, or zebra if you're American, raccoons, red pandas, meerkats. The list kind of goes on and on and on and on and on. Well, one of the animals that they did have as well were African porcupines, and I never really got much contact with them. If you were in their enclosure, then they got locked in to their house thing, and if they were in that, if you needed to go into the house, then they got locked out in the enclosure, because porcupines have a bit of a temper, as far as I understand. Anyway, one of the jobs that we had to do whilst we were clearing out their enclosure was pick up the loose quills. And me being a 16, 17-year-old animal enthusiast, decided to keep one of those quills. Not only did I keep it, but I actually turned it into an ink pen, which is the one that I have been using in this illustration, and I imagine that I will be using for the rest of Inktober. So that's the story behind that pen. I hope you enjoyed that. Anyway, going back to the image that I'm actually creating here, the ink pen was used just to do the very fine lines and the initial inking of the overall thing. I then moved in with an Aquash pen. These are really cool. You can fill them up with water and then use them for watercolors where you've got a reservoir of water actually in the brush itself, so you don't have to keep going back and adding water or anything. You can just give it a bit of a squeeze. But the other thing that you can do with them is fill them with a very watered down ink solution, which then acts as a very quick way of getting a wash onto a page or similar. The other thing that you can do with it is actually then use the brush as a brush for the concentrated ink, and then allow it to kind of gradiate out. If you're very clever, if you're very skilled with it, you can create a gradation back into the grey from the black. Mostly I use it just to get a very quick shadow into loose sketches and things that I'm doing, but here I used it to actually start the layering effect of the shadows. I then used the Aquash pen as just a normal brush, as I mentioned before, with just thick concentrated ink, and used it to create the black areas. So I didn't use the gradation, I just used it to do the final very dark black areas. Unfortunately, a lot of that got lost in the footage. I apologise for that, but turns out my memory card ran out of room on it right at the very end as I was finishing up the image, so you're sadly going to miss the very end of it, but I hope that the build up towards the end was enough to make up for the fact that there is no end, or you don't get to see the image actually finished. But that pretty much rounds us up and comes to the end of this video. I hope you have enjoyed my very first ever sketch or drawing or painting or whatever for Inktober. I'm looking forward to the next ones. I don't know that I'll be able to keep up and do all of them, just simply because everything is very busy for me at the moment, but I am trying to get back into making regular content for YouTube, and Inktober seems like a really good excuse. So again guys, I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have, please remember to leave a like, share, subscribe if you haven't already, and as always guys, take care and I'll see you next time.